I'm Di, and today I'm bringing you my October wrap-up. This month I read 6 things. This was more of a regular reading month for me. Last month I read quite a bit, and that's due to the large amount of manga that I had out from the library. But this month was more of a normal pace of reading, I'd say. Without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in the month of October. The first book I listened to was Once Haunted, Twice Shy by H.P. Mallory. This is the second book in the Peyton Clark series. I can't really say too much about this installment because it would give away a lot of what happened in the first book, but the first installment follows our main character Peyton when she moves into her newly inherited home and finds out that it is already inhabited by the ghost of a policeman named Drake. As she gets to know Drake and is starting to renovate her newly inherited home, she finds paper clippings about a serial murderer who was going around killing people with an axe, and they named him the Axeman. And so she starts amateur sleuthing to find out more about this mystery and how it could be related to her ancestor who also lived in the home. This second installment I did not enjoy as much as the first one. This book did have a little bit of a mystery, but it wasn't as suspenseful as the mystery in the first installment, and I found that it focused more on the personal relationships between the characters than it did on the mystery element. So I didn't care for that as much as I did in the first book. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. The next book I read was Destroy Me by Tahereh Mafi. This is the novella between Shatter Me and Unravel Me. I read this on Scribd as an ebook. This novella follows one of our characters, Warner, after the events of Shatter Me, and that is all that I am going to say on that. I did find this novella interesting. I thought it gave some insight into Warner's character and background, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. The next book I listened to on audiobook from Scribd, and I also read parts of it. It's The First to Die, which is the first installment of The Women's Murder Club by James Patterson. This story follows Lindsay, who is a police investigator, and she gets assigned a case where a newly wedded couple gets murdered on the night of their wedding. As the story progresses, they realize that this is probably the work of a serial killer. They bring in a new FBI investigator, and she is tasked to work with him on this case. She doesn't quite trust him, and so she comes up with the idea of bouncing thoughts about the case and just bantering about her findings with her good friend, who is the medical examiner assigned to the case. And then she makes friends with a rookie reporter, and in the process of the case also becomes acquaintances with the DA that's assigned the case, and so they become the Women's Murder Club. I did watch the TV show that was based on this series a few years ago, and I really enjoyed that. The story in this book I don't think was in there, but it's been a few years since I've seen it. So this was like a whole new story for me. I didn't quite care for Lindsay's character through most of the book. In the TV show, she's portrayed as a pretty strong woman, and in this book I thought she was portrayed as kind of whiny and weak. I did find the investigation of the murders to be very interesting. The chapters were super short, which I was surprised with. This was my first read from James Patterson, so I'm not sure if his writing style is that way, but having the short chapters really made the story seem like it was moving along really fast, and I appreciated that. I ended up giving this book 3 stars also. The next book I read was the buddy read I had on schedule with Christina DeVries. I will link her channel down in the description box below. We buddy read Shatter Me, which was the first installment of this series during the book buddy-a-thon in September, and so we continued our buddy read with the second installment, Unravel Me. This did not live up to my expectations. I really enjoyed Shatter Me, but this one was kind of a letdown. I thought Juliet became very whiny and weak. The romantic elements were just unrealistic, and I thought they were over the top, and I did not see how any of that added to the story. My favorite character in this series has got to be Kenji. I really liked him from the first installment. I continue to like him into this installment. If he was not in this novel, I do not think that I would have been able to handle what was going on, because he just brought everything back down to earth, told everything like it was, gave people kicks in the butts when they needed it, and he really made this installment enjoyable for me. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and Christina and I will be continuing our buddy read with the final installment in November. The next book I listened to was Nearly Dead in Deadwood by Anne Charles. This is the first book in the Deadwood series. This book follows our main character, Violet. She has recently moved to Deadwood with her twin children, who are 9 years old, I think, and she is in the realty business. When we meet Violet, she is on kind of her D-Day at the office. She hasn't been able to sell a house yet, and she really needs to in order to keep her job. In walks 2 newcomers to town, one who wants to sell his house and one who wants to buy. So things are starting to look up for her in that aspect. Her daughter, however, makes friends with a girl who happened to lose her friend the year prior to a kidnapping. Apparently there were several kidnappings, and the victims all look very similar to Violet's daughter, and so Violet becomes increasingly interested in finding out more about the case so she can keep her daughter safe from any potential harm. I listened to this book from Hoopla, which is also a resource that my library offers. This book reminded me a lot of Charlaine Harris's Aurora Teagarden mystery, especially with the realtor aspect of the novel. Some of the dialogue in this book had me literally laughing out loud. It was super entertaining. I really enjoyed listening to it. However, the narrator sounded computer generated through quite a bit of the novel. In fact, at the beginning of the book, I had to listen really well because I thought it was not a real person reading the book. Some other things that I didn't quite care for about this book is that there is some co-worker harassment in the realtor office that doesn't get handled like at all, and just some personal thoughts on how she disciplines her children. That didn't take away from the entertainment factor of this book for me, though. There was a little mystery, a little supernatural elements to it. There was some romance. All in all, I really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. The last book I read was another buddy read that I had on schedule, and this was Rot and Ruin, which is the first in the Benny Imura series by Jonathan Mayberry. I buddy read this with Raul from Latin Lector. I will link his channel down in the description box below. I normally don't gravitate towards zombie novels, however this one did seem interesting to me, and so I thought buddy reading it with someone would help me get through it if I didn't find the story to be as interesting as I hoped. This book follows our main character, Benny Imura, and he has just recently turned 15 years old. In this society, once you turn 15, you have a certain amount of time in order to secure a job, otherwise your rations get cut in half. So Benny and his friends are trying to find the occupation of their dreams, and Benny's older brother Tom is a very well-known and well-respected zombie hunter, but Benny cannot stand him. He doesn't want to go into the family business, and so he tries every other occupation under the sun and just does not click with any of them, so he finally tells his brother that he will learn to become a zombie hunter. But not everything is as it seems with what his brother Tom does. Tom tries to explain to Benny that his way of doing the killings is very different and means something different than the rest of what the other zombie hunters do. But Benny doesn't hear any of that. Benny just wants to get everything done and over with, and he doesn't want to spend any more time with Tom than he absolutely has to. As the book continues, Benny does a lot of growing. His relationship with Tom changes. He starts to understand more what Tom does and why the way he does it is so important and what it means to be in the family business. Despite all of the insecurities and doubts I had about going into this novel and not liking it, I really enjoyed this book. There's a little bit of a mystery element that's thrown into it, and I think the backstory of how the zombie apocalypse came to be was very well explained. This book had a lot of great action scenes, and I think it ended very well too. It ended on a note where I felt like I've got closure enough, even though there is more to the story in the next installment. What happened in this installment was concluded nicely and gave me some closure, and that's something that I really appreciate, especially when reading books in series. I hate when series have cliffhanger endings, and thankfully this one did not have one. I think if you avoid zombie books because you just think that it's not a genre that you'd be interested in, or you've read other books that you disliked that included zombies, I would highly suggest that you give this one a try, because it's more than just a book about zombies and killing zombies. It's a book about family and friends and the lengths you'd go through to keep somebody you love safe. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. And that's all the books that I read in the month of October. I would not say that any of the books that I read were scary, unfortunately. So I'm actually still feeling the need to fill that compartment in my reading life. But I still did enjoy all the books that I read this month. If you've read these books, or if you plan to read any of these books, please let me know down in the comments below. I would love to chat with you about them. I hope you are all doing great, and until next time, take care and Smi-Le always. Bye.